I hope that I hope we are all doing well. Can you send your favorite emoji if you can hear me and if you can't wait for tonight's session? All right. That's so amazing. That's so amazing. I'm glad to have you all here tonight. So before we begin, I would like us to say a short prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for tonight. We thank you for the gift of life, protection, guidance, and how far you've brought us. We thank you for the opportunity to learn today on how we can cause change in our societies. It's our prayer that may tonight provide us with insights and stir up the desire in us to start leading change in our little way, in our societies, our schools, or wherever we find ourselves. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray with thanksgiving. Amen. You're all welcome once again to tonight's session on leading change. So tonight we'll be discussing the role of youth in Africa's leadership and governance. And we'll be discussing exactly how we can lead change in our societies. I'll call on my co-host Phoebe to introduce our guest speaker and introduce the introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all here and to have you join our conversation this evening. As Deborah mentioned, tonight I have the singular honor of giving the introductory remarks as well as introducing our guest speaker. I can't wait to hear from her, and I bet she can too. But before she comes, you would all agree with me that the call for change in recent times has been so loud. And in recent times, we've had the youth protest and share their sentiments via social media for the need of change. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that out of the 1.55 billion people in Africa, the youth constitute a 60% of it. So what does this mean for us? This means for us that we have large labor force, creativity and innovation, and then issues of unemployment and the likes. It also means for us that in a few years to come, or even now, the narrative of Africa depends largely on what we do or do not do. That's why my co-host and I deem it necessary to have this conversation on how we can contribute to change in our society. Now to our guest speaker. From student leadership to an influential voice for youth empowerment, our guest tonight stands as a shining example of dedication, courage, and purpose in Ghana and across Africa. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and English, and a master's degree in international affairs and diplomacy, and a competency certificate from the African Institute of Economic Development and Planning under the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. As a natural orator and accomplished public speaker, she has graced notable platforms such as TEDx and the African Economic Dialogue. In 2016, she made history as the second female SLC president of the University of Ghana, becoming the only second woman in several years to occupy that prestigious office. Since then, she has devoted herself to youth empowerment, advocacy, and leadership development through her initiatives and ventures, including the Election Lounge, Invest Field Africa, ACDL and Bespoke by ACDL. She continues to drive positive change and champion economic development. Her remarkable contributions to community development has also earned her a nomination for the 40 Under 40 Awards. With her debut leadership forum, the Election Lounge, she continues to mentor and equip young people, passionately advocating for the meaningful inclusion of youth in governance, especially for those of us who are ready to lead now. She is married to Reverend Dr. Albert Agbi, and their union is blessed with a beautiful daughter. Friends, please join me with all the warm reactions, and in your chat box, welcome Mrs. Etinam Agbi. Mrs. Etinam Agbi, your audience awaits you. We are honored to have you here this evening. Please let's continue to welcome our guest, Evenas.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, can.
Okay. I was trying to put on my video, but can you see me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, I can see myself, so
Oh,
sorry. Yeah. Anyways, good evening, Deborah, good evening, Phoebe, and to all the cohorts in this leadership program. Thank you for the opportunity to come and interact and share a few things that I believe are my perspective and definitely will um, be arguably something that I feel or believe might change your mindset about leadership on the continent. I'm happy particularly because this program is not just centered to, and I'm pretty sure there's a greater amount of you who are Ghanaians, right? So I'm happy that this is more directed towards the African continent. Earlier this week, I was on a panel called the Resistance Bureau, I believe, and I was there with one lady who actually was contesting to become a youth but president for I think Uganda, very young. I think she's called Yvonne. Phenomenal lady, very young, but was trying really hard to be given the nod as president. And I think, internal politics just didn't allow that to happen. And I met another young lady who is like the personal assistant to the vice president of Namibia. Namibia has an all woman first three executive, the top tier are all women. So I have been very encouraged on the continent. And I'm believing that it's just the beginning for greater things for us young people. So I think when I joined in the call, you guys had already prayed. So I'll just go ahead and talk. So the theme I was giving today was the role of youth in Africa's leadership um, and governance, how we can contribute to change in our society. The continent is very versatile. Give me a second. I want to. So the continent is versatile. We have a greater amount of entrepreneurs on the African continent. We have a great amount of innovation and technology coming from the continent. And the nexus of independence and politics and advocacy is also definitely on the African continent. So it begs the question of where do we position ourselves and how do we stand as young people? How do we make ourselves relevant on the continent from the beginning, the word go? When we take other economies, other countries across different continents, one of the things that really stand out is how they are actively, involving young people. You could take China, for instance, in their trade economy, in their, finance economy, in their production and manufacturing economy, the youth is not left out. A greater chunk of people on AliExpress, Alibaba, who are producers and huge business owners and entrepreneurs are young people, averagely between the age of 16 and say 30. And you can see the kind of things. In fact, some of the very affordable accessories that we use in Ghana, in fact, a greater chunk of them are always assembled by these young people. And these are projects. So in the greater scheme of things, where do we lie? Now, regarding politics as well, the African continent is one of the huge and most influential case Hi guys. Sorry, I think for some reason I got logged off.
Yes,
Um,
we can hear you
do you hear
now.
me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Do you think the network problem is from my end? Or
Yes,
yeah,
I think
I don't know why
it
the
should
network is not working very well for me today.
I think it should be your internet,
Apologies.
but we can hear you now.
Yeah, okay, okay. Maybe I'll just keep my video off so I can use the bandwidth to talk.
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. So as I was saying, the part about political engagement on the African continent has a lot to do with us being like a really good case study because Ghana, for instance, was the first nation in the sub-Saharan Africa that gained independence. We had the commencement of active young students who championed these things. And so the question of whether you are competent right now in your capacity as a young person to be influential in the matters of governance and politics, the question is yes, your time is now, right? Many things that you can be able to do that people have done in the past just points towards how possible it is. So today our conversation is just going to be centered around these things. And then I mentioned two other things that are important parameters, which is community engagement and then digital influence. So these four things: policy and governance, entrepreneurship and innovation, community engagement, and then the last one being digital influence will be the nexus of all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And I know there's going to be questions at the end of the day, but if there's anything I say that you need more clarity on, just feel free and raise your hands, and I'm sure I'll be interrupted, and I can address it. Okay. So the first issue that I will talk about is the policy and governance bits, which I consider very, very important. The question is, how do we influence in the space of politics? How do we make impact in the space of governance? What are some of the things that we should be focusing on doing as Africans, as young Africans on the continent who are very intrigued about contributing and making a mark? These days, the narrative is that, oh, we are seeing most of the godfathers and the very, very politically astute people who have the money as the ones who are going up ahead for elections, and the demographics are not helping us. But it is usually because you are looking at governance and politics to be only the electoral activities, only the kind of things that are leading to somebody, for instance, holding a seat. It is only those things that should be vied for that you are considering politics. But I am of the opinion that politics and policy and governance is so vast that every young person can be able to find a way to key in, right? Even as a national service personnel, there are things that you can be able to do to influence policy on a larger scale, right from where you find yourself. And the moment you begin to identify some of these opportunities within the grassroots level or within I'm using grassroots advisably to mean wherever you find yourself, you can be able to still impact in the space of governance and politics without even trying to meddle in anything that looks like upskill. Because I mean, the truth is, eventually you want to get to that upskill point, but until then, what is your style? What is what you're doing to be able to find influence? And don't forget that the little things you contribute and culminate to do is what forms a greater picture at the end of the day. So you're asking yourself, how can I be able to, in maybe 5, 10 years, stand for a seat if I don't have the credentials, if I don't have the track record? So it's important for you to consider the little things. That's my first point. So consider the little things that you will do within your level of influence that can feed into the bigger picture, right? So from the bottom up approach, the small things that you can be able to do. And what are some of the things that you can be able to do? So, and I use the example of, say, being a national service person. Most of our organizations who have national service persons have a structure where these individuals can be able to contribute to policy. So if, let's say, your boss has asked you to write a paper, or they're going to have they're going to have a presentation presentation, or they're going to have to do a board meeting, and you're asked to put together documentation, you're asked to put together some things that are of importance that could bring change. Are you thinking wide? Are you thinking solution? Are you thinking intervention? So that these things are carried on by some of these superiors that you have. That's one of the ways, right? And another thing you can also consider is when it comes to group leadership, or things that are on your student level, things that are on the tertiary level, things that are on maybe a young entrepreneur's level. How are you able to make impact? So let's say I'm a business owner and I realize that it's so difficult to file my taxes, and I go to GRA. I'm contributing to the support for governance by letting them understand what the general population's problem is, right? So it starts with helping to identify the problems, coming to solve the problems, and all of that. And then another thing that you need to do when it comes to influencing policy and governance is exercising your political rights, right? And encouraging people to do that. I realize that anytime it's election time, or people are doing campaign, people feel involving themselves in the election is like a dent on their image of political alliance. But don't forget that whether you like it or not, anybody who decides to vote for another person is making the decision for yourself and for themselves as well, if you decide not to, right? So as an individual, what are some of the things that you would now consider as important in the space of politics, where you are probing policies that or campaign messages, and you are encouraging people to align with the reasonable campaign messages that are put on there on all the platforms? Another way of supporting governance is also empowering like-minded people who are equally young, who are women. So making sure that the minority in the society are protected and their interests are well represented in governance and everything that has to do with policy and advocacy, right? So that's the bit about the policy aspect of it. Now, I earlier in the conversation, I was talking to you about how the African continent is one of the nexus of entrepreneurship and innovation. So if you pick uh, every 10 young person in Ghana right now, statistics would have it arguably that you would find about half or more than half being interested in business, being interested in innovation. It could be through the sales of goods and providing services. It could be innovation in manufacturing. It could be innovation in soft technology. It could be innovation in academia and climate change. There are diverse interests that young people in Ghana or on the African continent have picked up now. And it's almost as if there's so much, we don't even have room anymore. And that is how beautiful it is. And so the question is, how do you key into these new terrain of entrepreneurship and innovation? How do you make sure that you are not left out on this train that is moving? And some of the ways is identifying the very key things that are changing the world now. Identifying some of the very key things that are changing the world now. Now, one of the things I have personally identified is the advent of a lot of financial technology, payment platforms, payment systems, AI, apps, technologies. And many people would say, well, I have not been trained in that space, so how do I key in? Ladies and gentlemen, the value chain for that is so long and so vast. So 2 weeks ago, I wanted somebody to buy me something from Nigeria. And I happened to have to send the person some money. And the person said, oh, there's just a middle person that, I still use, and I can be able to just, and it's so fast, and I can be able to just access that, and it's not as expensive. And I said, but there are apps now that you could pay, cross-national and all of that. And then I realized that some of the apps that I was exploring had a pretty much cumbersome process, right? So the middleman seemed to have been more faster. And I'm asking myself, wait, does it mean that there still hasn't been like a one-stop solution for these things? When you use services, when you use some of these resources, what you should be doing is asking the questions that matter. What are the things that are changing the world now? What are the things that are changing the world now?
Hi, everyone. Please, if you can hear me,
Hello,
please send an
Deborah.
yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I believe our guest speaker's network isn't so stable. So, in the meantime, while we wait for her, I would like us to have a short discussion. So, Phoebe, kindly alert me when our guest speaker comes in.
Well noted, Debbie.
All right. So, I would like to share just an experience when it comes to leadership. Personally, for me, growing up, I always didn't like taking up leadership roles at all. Probably because I felt like I wasn't competent enough, or like the leadership roles takes a lot of requires a lot of responsibilities, time, effort. Okay, so we'll continue our discussion
Guys,
later.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You're welcome,
Oh,
Wes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Today, it's just quite unfortunate. I'm not sure what's happening. I kept talking. I didn't even know that the thing had gone off. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen. Pardon. So maybe I'll try to like move through it very quickly so that we can do our question and answers, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
Phoebe,
That's fine.
Yes, please, that's fine.
hello?
Hello, Mrs. Agbi, please, that's fine. We
Can you
can
hear
hear
me?
you. Yes, we can.
Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Agbi. We can clearly hear you.
Okay, okay.
All right, Debbie. All right, Debbie, I think you can continue whilst we wait for our guest speaker too.
Is, is it better?
All right, it's better now. It's
Yes,
better.
yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to see whether I can one of my ladies are with me. Maybe I should try to see whether I would, if it goes off again, I might have to use her phone.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, sure. Thank you. So I think that we're talking about how to key into entrepreneurship so you can be able to support, you know, on the African continent.
Yeah,
And I was saying how it's such a global thing now that young people are, the framework of entrepreneurship and innovation, and everybody's depending on the young people and how we can be able to key into the success and the prosperity of the continent. When you consider entrepreneurship and you tie it into governance, to a very large extent, the economy of every state runs on some of these interactions, not just within the state for fiscal policy, but also for international relations, also for international trade affiliations and stuff like that. So I always tell people that if you really want to make a mark in the space of entrepreneurship and innovation, you want to consider how can you be able to, um, you know, expand the reach of services, expand the reach of the product you're coming up with. Because one thing I've noticed about entrepreneurs in Ghana is that everybody is doing the very limited things that are only needed in the community among their friends, and that's it. And many people are business owners and they call themselves entrepreneurs. So how are you thinking? Are you able to open up the spectrum of your thoughts regarding entrepreneurship and innovation? Because another thing too is the moment you are growing as young people in that space, government is able to shift policy to support you. So, for instance, government has things like tax waivers for companies that are startups for a particular time, and then after that, when you're growing, they have all these support system. You cannot be able to access some of these governance and policy things towards entrepreneurship if you don't have that drive, or we've not been able to build that kind of economy. So it's one of the things that young people have to now consider. How do we, key into that? Maybe you're not the kind who's an entrepreneur, but how have you identified to support, people who are around you who have the capacity, people who are around you who are doing incredible things in the space of innovation, and even talking about innovation is one of the things that drives foreign direct investment. So you are here, and then maybe another country will say, we are bringing $10 billion, we are bringing this to support that, and all these things are shaped within the African prosperity, right? So if you are not on that train, you really want to find out, what do I do? And if you are with a corporate institution that is providing some form of support to the continent, how am I able to let the vision and the mission of that organization tie into advancement? So at every point, you really want to make sure that there are things that you are considering, which is not only a momentarily sufficient solution, but also pushing it to the continent at large and raising the image of the country, right? And there's an interesting part of this conversation, which is some of the challenges that young people face. Because the moment you start talking about these things, and it's very, very typical of Africa, we always see the challenges, we always see the problems that are with something, but we always struggle to find the solutions, or we will struggle to implement the solutions that come with. So one of the things that I'd always encourage people to do is, while you're thinking about the challenges and the problems that exist on the continent, why don't you do that vis-a-vis the the ways that you consider to be feel-safe support system, in navigating some of these things. So I believe very strongly that some of these challenges that I'm going to be mentioning, I don't like dwelling on the challenges so much, but it's something that you cannot do away with when it comes to some of these things. And I think one of them is the fact that lately, when you are identifying how young people fill the gap, people are beginning to think that it's a style of tokenism. Now, tokenism is just a way of using one to represent all, just to make a statement, basically. So, for instance, you go into a boardroom and it's like, oh, the SGGs are saying you should support women, and in leadership, the young people need to be there. We want to show the whole world that we are advocating for young people being a part of governance, and so we just want to pick just anybody and put there, and the people become a white elephant. Right, that's one of the ways that people have always thought, this is not the solution. Are we able to equip ourselves as young people so that when opportunities come for us to fill the rooms and to sit by the tables, we have all that it takes to be able to, fill that spot with all the excellence that we have, right? Another thing that people have considered as another channel for tokenism is when young people are only used during elections and then that's it. And they feel like it's just a style of young people just used as tokens. Oh, we are involving the young people. The young people are the ones campaigning. Do you see how the young people are for us? And do you see, how active they are? And look at the grassroots, and the conversation goes on. And it's like, yeah, there's a youth for change, and the youth for this, and youth for President so and so. And you always realize that when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to proper governance after the elections are won, the young people are now asking themselves, hey, what happened to us? Hey, you forgotten about us. Hey, we need jobs, and we need this, and we need. And so it becomes a problem and a gap that has to be filled. I always believe that every young person who tries to campaign should find themselves in the position where, with or without the political party pulling them along, they can be able to make a good case for their influence. And that has to be with and be through many, many ways of finding influence among your communities. I was in the campaign, I was active in the campaign. But if you ask me whether or not I feel somebody owes me something, that is another question. If you ask me also whether or not I still find myself relevance in the space of youth advocacy, in the space of championing youth right, in a space of championing women in leadership, am I still holding that position? Yes. What am I doing about it? I'm on this platform. I've accepted to talk to young people. That is one of the ways. Sometimes it may not look like the fancy thing. Sometimes it may not look like what is bringing the direct dividends now. But in the future, some of these things are able to, come together for you to achieve an optimal impact, not just for your society, but for yourself. When you walk into a room, you tell them, this is what I've done. These are the things that I did. In my country, I was involved in this and that and that. And it asks you your credentials. I think that sometimes people always forget to to table some of these accomplishments that they have achieved while doing these things, sometimes even pro bono and not benefiting anything into, they fail to translate it into what can yield for them as individuals, right? If you are asked to put a profile of yourself, sometimes some of the things that I even forget to put on my profile. And you see, you will pick it and you're like, hey, this young lady did all these things. It is not because, I had all the time in the world, and it is because I was conscious enough to say, look, I am building a portfolio in governance. I'm building a portfolio in the international community, and this is what I want to look like. So this is to encourage everybody on this call that when you have the chance, you really want to be able to add that bandwidth to yourself, not just because you are waiting for somebody to give you an appointment, or you're waiting for somebody to come and say, hey, come and be my vice president of the Republic of Ghana. But you walk into a room and somebody says, this is somebody who carries weight because of some of the things that they have done in supporting. So I think that I would stop here. A lot has been said. Sometimes, if you say too many things, the audience tend to forget some of the most important or salient things that I talked about. And then I'll open the floor up for questions. Please don't tell me you don't have any questions, because this is a conversation. The moderators would, take us through some of the things that have to be said. But thank you so much for your audience. And once again, so sorry that the internet is not allowing us to have a good flow. I think for now, it's been great so far. So please ask questions. Please let me know what your thoughts are. That doesn't have to be questions. It could also be contributions on what you think that this topic has a near to your benefit. Thank you so much. I yield the mic.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Agli. That was so insightful. Friends, it's now time for questions and answers. So the floor is open. If you would want to share any opinions or ask any questions, kindly use the raise hand feature or type in the chat box. Please, the floor is open. We have a few questions, but before we read those ones, we would want to hear from those who are on the call now. Okay, so I'll proceed with my question. Mrs. Agbi, I would want to know, as someone or as a young person who is not actively in politics or does not join any political party, how do I see opportunities to contribute to policy formulation and implementation in our society? Because I feel like sometimes you would have to be part of a political party, or you would have to be in student politics to be able to contribute to policy formulation and implementation. Once you're not on that level, you don't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
Hello, Mrs. Agbi. Please, we did not hear your response. Okay, so while we wait for her, I'll read the questions we have here.
Another one.
Hello, Mrs.
Are you able to
Agbi.
hear me?
No.
Yeah, you're able to hear me, right?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right, sure. So I think that I was mentioning that earlier in my submission concerning how, it's a bottom up approach all the time. You Before you start running, you want to crawl, you want to walk, you want to jog. It's a nice sequel, right? And when you are not in politics, when you're not in politics, it doesn't mean that you. Wait, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. I think my other phone came in. So when you're not in politics, there's a tendency of feeling, oh, the decision makers are so far away and all that. And I think I was mentioning that even as a national service person, even as a somebody who is part of a youth group or an international organization, or you are in an office, maybe you are a civil servant, wherever you are, right? It is important for you to be able to find that some of these loopholes that exist in places where you know that your voice could be articulated in. So even if let's say you're working in the banking sector and you've identified some things, because it's another thing too is that when you are contributing to policy, people always look at it very abstractly. Like you look at it as if it's like you have to go and write a paper and submit it. No, there are some things that you identify within your space, right? That has a tendency of being being fed into a bigger picture. So let's say you're working in the banking space and you realize that there is a problem with maybe money transactions that the BOG has capped in a certain way. This is policy, but on your level, and you found that there's a loophole, there's something that you can be able to do about it. What you have to do is to mention some of these things. It's like start from where you are. That's what I'm trying to say. When you've identified something that is not right, that fits into a bigger national portfolio, how are you able as an individual to say, oh, boss, this is what I've identified? Don't you think that it's supposed to be done like that and that and that and that? And the information then trickles down. I think 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to one friend of mine who was asked to make some contributions in a meeting, and he gave some very salient suggestions. And we were listening to um, the finance minister make his presentation of the budget, only for us to hear that that thing he shared in some meeting was mentioned. And he was like, I bet you this is from me. And he was so excited, right? Because the way he had introduced it was not directly to the finance minister or to anybody who wrote that, but his thought was picked and was should be a political appointee, may not be somebody who is very, over there yet. But you can be able to make those contributions within that space you find yourself. And you'll be surprised that some of these things get to the right quarters. At the end of the day, I don't think it's about the credit for you as much as it is about the influence and the change, right? And if you have that mindset, you realize that eventually the credit will come after because you may have done all these contributions in the past gradually. I don't know if I'm making sense.
All right. Thank you. That was insightful. So opportunities were given to us to share our questions via a link, and I have received a few questions, so I'll read them. The floor is open to everyone else to share their opinions as well, not just Mrs. Zaki. So the first question is, how can the youth overcome the challenges of the older leaders staying too long in positions of power and not allowing the younger competent leaders to take their places? So I'll read the question again. How can the youth overcome the challenges of older leaders staying too long in positions of power and not allowing the younger competent leaders to take their places?
Mm, that's an interesting question. Maybe this is one that anyone who has some thoughts could also share, I believe. Eh, Should we throw it out there, or I am to answer that? I don't have a problem. I just felt this is one of the questions that can trigger like a broader discourse.
Friends, we are open to your opinions, so if you can share before Mrs. Agbi comes in. All right, so I'll take the question again. How
Somebody's
can
asking that you read the mess, they read the.
how can the
Question.
youth overcome the challenges of older leaders
Yeah.
staying too long in positions of power and not allowing the younger competent leaders to take their places?
So, people, our friends, I think Deborah raised her hand.
Hello, Deborah. Kindly proceed.
Hi, Phoebe.
Hi, Debbie.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Agbi, for this opportunity to also share my opinion. And this has been a wonderful session with us tonight. So I would say that you see, we are thinking about how we can get to that higher position because the big men are there and they've been there for several years. They've retired and they are still there. But why don't we look at the little ways in which we can cause change? Mrs. Agbi made mention that we need to start from where we are. Where are you? What difference can you make at where you are currently? So instead of focusing on taking the big positions like being a president or whatever, Minister of Agriculture or something, what difference can you make at where you are currently? Start from there, work your way through the process, and as time goes on, you will get there. So I feel like it will be very challenging if you say it will take time. It will actually take time for us to change our, our minds because when it comes to giving the young people opportunity, we are, cause change from where we are, and not think that we are incompetent in causing change until we are given the titles and big opportunities and big stages before we can do something. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great point. That's a very great point.
Mrs. Agbi,
Um,
would you want to share anything?
well, so I think that, I mean, aside with the point she's making, I've always believed that when you have equipped yourself to a certain capacity, when you when you are inevitable, they can pass you by. And I saw this because the current finance minister is a young person. He's not even, I'd give him maybe like he's now maybe approaching just pretty young. Because they've been in politics for a while, you would think they are in their 50s and stuff like that. Approaching when um appointments were coming, there was no way his position was contested. Because over the years, the 8 years in opposition, he had made himself so influential on the finance committee that the president couldn't have an option. There are many other options of older people who are now retiring and stuff who could have been, right? Um, um, Dr. Budufour and a few people who in the past in the NDC have proven themselves. They know. Said Tekpe is still there. He used to be finance minister. They know the stuff. And the finance minister now, he's the youngest among all the people who have such credentials. So I've always said that when you equip yourself in a certain capacity, and you see, in fact, not only young people, our old folks, now they're on the TikToks, they are seeing all the things. They listen. Now, news is read in Tree, news is read in Ghana, news is read in Ewe, all that. So they understand the issues, they understand the policy. And imagine if you're a young person and they come and read your credential that this is the position they're giving you because you've gone through so, you have this credential, you've done this, you've done that. It will not be contested. Why? Because you've equipped yourself for it. So let's focus our energies on making sure that we are fit for the job. Instead of just saying we just want to be in the position or we just feel young people should be in the position. I remember back in the time, there was a particular seat that became vacant in Ghana. And I was young. I've been doing it just a few years in my career. And they said, "Oh, won't I consider myself to go?" And I said, "No. If you give me the money now to go and contest for this seat, I'll eat the money. You know why? I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm equipped to have this position. Not because I don't see myself to learn on the job or anything like that. I want the opportunity to come at when I would optimally produce output. Like I want you to see that this girl is doing the work. And many of us are so quick to want to jump into the positions and not forgetting that we have the whole world to prove to that we are capable. There are some, I think it was a New Zealand or Australian politician or something like that who served for a few months and just left office. She said, no, 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 no. I don't think this is it for me. Right? She was equipped. I don't think any African young person would do that because that position is sweet. They said about the popularity, and they forget the reason why they're there. And that is how it starts. And then they'll give one person, two people a chance, and they go and mess up. And a lot of young people. And I'll tell you this: a lot of the folks that are old have that whole narrative that when they put you there, you might not live up to the standard. You might embarrass them, so they are scared. So it is a two side to this coin. Equip yourself. Let them know that when they give you the post, they can go and sleep comfortably, and they would watch you to execute. So I think that answers our question, madam.
Thank you. That was a great one. So we shouldn't be in a hurry to occupy the big positions. We should build our capacity. And then when we do that, we will be noticed. Thank you, Mrs. Agui,
Yes.
and thank you to everyone that contributed. We'll move to the next question, which says that how do I impact change in a society with a very misinformed mentality whilst being financially incapable to be a good leader? How do I impact change in a society with a very misinformed mentality whilst being incapable, financially incapable to become a good leader?
Okay, so this question is like Gary Soakins. You have like
It's a lot
so
of
many things.
yeah.
You added Nkatia burger and you added granite as well. Let's unpack it. So, you are saying that you are in a misinformed society. But now my question is, what is making you think that you are in a misinformed society? And what do you know that contradicts what the real information is? So,
That's a question for thought. If you are able to identify
since
that
we
you
are
are
on a leadership session now, and the question, what I'm trying to say is that since we are on here as people who are aspiring to be very influential people, very like people who can pull attention and all that. When we are asking questions, right? One of the things I've always said is consider how you are expecting the answer to come when you are answering the question. Anticipate the answer, right? You may not have the answer, but anticipate the answer. If the answer you're anticipating is one that is going to be juggled up, then it means that the question has some liabilities in it, right? It could be a dilemma, but I'm not really seeing where the person who is asking the question is coming from in regards to misinformed community. See, if I'm in a community with so much going on, but they don't have the capacity to deal with it. That's how I understand the question they're trying to ask. And to answer that question, I think that to solve problems is not always about the finances or about the resources that you need in solving them. When you are in a society where there is maybe some imbalances and all of that, I think that the first thing you need to look at is the resource of people, not the resource of money. The resource of people means that look around you. Are there people who can be able to bring this problem down its knees? If the answer is yes, can you reach out to them? If the answer is yes, can they help? If the answer is yes, then let's help. So let that be your mindset moving forward. that you don't need fund, you don't need some money to solve problems on the face value. Well, this we've reached a point where there is intervention. We are in a democratic country where governance has a lot of um, social interventions around. You will not know until you research, but governments over the years have brought about so many ways of solving problems that you don't need to necessarily have to dish money from your pocket in doing that. So I'll give an example. Anyone who is having a criminal issue or a court issue and all that has the right for fair hearing, has a right to a lawyer from the state. So the Office of the Attorney General will give you support. You tell them, you go there, you say, I have a case and I need a lawyer to help me pro bono. The Constitution, for instance, demands that you should have that solution. Somebody should be allocated to you to help you. Right. There are so many ways. So the truth is, your question is answered through solutions that the society brings and not necessarily your money. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Saki. And I would want to add something small. So I believe once you've been able to identify that you are in a misinformed society, that means you know something which is making you think like this is not right. So that is
Mhm.
where advocacy comes in. That is where you begin to speak what you think is right. So you don't just keep mute and watch the misinformation go. You contribute
Mhm.
by adding your voice, by
That's
correcting
right.
people when they say things that are wrong. And just like Mrs. Agui said, you don't need money to do a lot of things. And even if you need money, she mentioned the resource of people. So you can reach out to people and ask for help. Thank you, Mrs. Agi. So friends on here, please, if you have any more questions, we have a lot of questions here, but I would want to hear from those of us on the call. Kindly use the raise hand feature if you have a question or you have any thoughts you'd want to share with us. Okay, if we do not have any questions, what is one thing you have learned from today's conversation? What is one thing you are taking away? I believe we've all learned something from our
Yeah.
meeting. So I'd want to hear from us.
I've actually been looking forward to hearing from this. This is a leadership forum page or like a fellowship. So, the expectations are that
A lot of insights have been dropped this evening. So
there's a
kind,
lot of energy about what you do when you're speaking. 'Cause you can't be quiet fellow. So,
okay, maybe you can't speak, but you can type in the chat box as well. All right, Mrs. Agbi, whilst you wait, let me read the last question from our list here. So the question is, how do I uphold my integrity and continue to do the right things when it seems like everyone has been doing the wrong things for so long that they have been normalized? So in a system where wrong has been normalized, how do you uphold integrity? Okay, so we have a hand up. Hello, Esther. Please, the floor is all yours. Can we hear from you now?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Esther.
It's a great. Hi, I didn't get the speaker's name, but I think I've been so blessed being here. It was by chance I'm here, but I think it wasn't so by chance in the internal will of God. So I I picked the um, point on being able to influence change and even start from the grassroots. If you want to get into governance and if you want to help implement policies in the area where you think there's a concern. And so this might not be a question, but I just keep wondering because particularly I'm interested in the educational sector and And I believe that the majority of us here have heard the concerns on how our educational system as Africa is one that is like is lagging. So we are equipping our children for yesterday instead of equipping our children for the future. So I mean, after hearing what the speaker had to say, I'm just here thinking about how can I, as part of the youth who is interested in the educational sector, start to affect change even where I am. I would be glad if I hear her thoughts on it, so that I leave here with more specific answers. Thank you.
Okay, Esther, can you kindly go over your question again briefly for us?
All right, sure. So I was saying that taking you from what she said about the um, influencing or um, causing
Hello, Esther.
change where you are and not
Esther, your line
waiting.
was
Hi,
breaking.
can you hear me?
Hello,
Oh, so
your line
can
was
you hear me,
breaking.
please?
Yes,
Can
we
you hear
can
me?
hear you now.
Okay. All right, sure. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So I was saying that I would love to hear the speaker's thoughts on how I can, as a youth who is interested in education, like implementing, affecting the policies in the educational system, particularly because there are lots of concerns on our educational system, educating children for yesterday instead of educating them for the future. How can I affect these policies even from the grassroots? Like what are some practical ways she can suggest to anybody who is interested in doing that?
All right.
Yes,
Did you
yes,
hear
please.
me?
Yes,
All
Okay.
right, sure. Thank
Um,
you.
Phoebe. So Esther, hello. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm good by
Are you
then.
part of the fellowship, Esther?
Yeah, I am from the best cohort so far of this um
Hey,
leadership program. So I'm from the fourth cohort.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I was just going to give you a little tip. So, usually in sessions like this, right, it's also very important for you to, especially because you are their senior in the cohort system, to have a disposition of some form of, I don't want to call it advancement. Okay, yeah, let me use that word, advance, and that can come through very, very different ways and instantly. Let's say you join on a meeting and just want to do like a little due diligence, a little recce that, hey, who are the people here? Um, Anytime I go on any panel, and I'll answer your question real quick, but I just want to teach all of us this skill. Anytime I go on any panel, or anytime I go, this I'm supposed to speak with some people and all of that, or I'm going to listen to people. I do a little homework. Who is this person? Because you see, it's also very, very important for you to want to know what. Um, so that's a little tip for anyone and everyone in the future. I mean, you may not have known the name immediately, but just politics. That's all there is about leadership. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes when ministers are going to speak, they don't even know their their brief is written to them, and like who are the people in the these are the things that make them know them personally. So that's just by the way for the future. It creates such a good impression of you and what you stand for. Now the question about grassroots educational influence, there are many, many, many ways you can be able to do that. I know a few groups, they're called Teach for Ghana, um, a lot of philanthropic groups that do voluntarily go into communities that impact. And when they do, they are able to reach out to the district coordinators for education. You see, that there is nothing new now, right? Everything that seems to look like a problem has been crafted to come through. Education is one of the best in Ghana where you can be able to make an impact. People think that it's so difficult, but sometimes you may not even need that the country rewrites the laws just for that impact to be had. I know some people who have volunteered to go and do teaching for the national service in communities, and they say, "Oh, grassroots, the kids don't see computers, they don't know IT," and they've taken it upon themselves to do those things, and it's a way of impacting. They didn't wait on government to say, "I'm sending over laptops for ICT training." Their one laptop is what they have used to equip young people in that community. So to answer your question, influencing change is more practical than even policy than you think. And the moment you are able to recognize that your small impact is what's culminating into the bigger picture, the better it is. It's like that. You're making impacts, just know where to start from, and be very realistic in your search for these things. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Agbi. Esther, I hope your question
You,
has been
Phoebe.
answered and would be closing soon. From our discussion this evening, we have learned a lot from how to contribute to policy and governance in our own small way, entrepreneurship, advocacy, and the fact that we have to build capacity and shouldn't be in a rush to occupy the big positions. I'd conclude with a clarion call that it is not enough to just speak and shout for change. The protests are good, the shouts on social media are good, but it is more honorable and expedient if we actually contribute to this change by moving out, by not just speaking. We can do more. So this evening, we are very much grateful to